I'm going to quickly explain what the Camino de Santiago is. It was originally, 900 years ago, a pilgrimage that ends up at Santiago, at the tomb of St. James. So it was originally a Catholic pilgrimage across northern Spain. There are many different routes. The yellow route is the route that we walked. And these days, it is not really a religious pilgrimage anymore. People do it for all sorts of reasons, physical reasons, emotional reasons, or just to have an adventure and a lovely hike in a long place through beautiful scenery and villages. Many reasons to walk the Camino. Our reasons, I walked with my daughter and her friend, and my reason to walk the Camino were emotional. I was at a really bad space in my life. I needed some answers. Physical, I wanted the adventure. I knew that a long walk would get me out of all my stuff. And spiritual, I needed to find that connection again with myself. If we look at our vision or our sense of purpose, before I did that trip, I actually had no vision at all. I had no sense of purpose. And sometimes this is quite difficult to establish anyway. If your goals lead to your vision and your goals are aligned with your values and your commitments that you make are in line with your goals, eventually you can achieve your vision. So it's a process. If your commitments are inspiring, moving, and touching, or IMTing, you're passionate about it, it moves you, it inspires you, then that needs to link to your goals and eventually to your vision. And of course, being out of the comfort zone, which is the biggie. When we look at our commitments and our integrity, if we make a commitment to do something, if our integrity is low and we don't do it, then what's the point really? How are we going to get to our goals? So to do what I said I would do, by when I said I would do it, that is Marc Steinberg's definition of integrity. How are you sitting with integrity in your life right now? Your probability of achieving success with achieving your goals is directly linked to that level of integrity. And of course that makes perfect sense, because if your integrity is high, you're sticking to your commitments are in line with your goals and your values, you'll eventually get to your vision. So, commitments, let's talk about the Camino again. This long trip that my daughter and I decided to do in 2009, we decided that we would do it when she left school. 2014 came along and we now needed to make some plans. The commitments that we had to put in place, obviously financial. She actually worked for a year. She had a gap year and worked at a school to save up some money. I was working in the finance industry at that stage, and I saved up my commissions like crazy. We booked our air tickets a year in advance. The physical commitments that we had to make. For myself, I'd had back problems for many years, so I had to go to biokinetics for 6 months, 3 times a week, just to get my back strong enough so I could do this walk. Obviously, the physical fitness had to be there as well. For me, I had to do quite a bit of training. My daughter didn't. She just arrived there and walked, but she was 20 and I was in my 50s, so that makes quite a difference. I've got a long list of commitments that we had to make to actually make this happen. So the first goal wasn't to finish the Camino and arrive in Santiago. Our first goal was to actually be ready by the 11th of May. So commitments in terms of packing lists. What do you take? You're going to have your rucksack on your back. You're walking for 3 weeks across Spain to 15% of your body weight being in your rucksack. How was I going to walk across Spain carrying 8 kilograms? And that's it for 3 weeks. Anyway, I've Googled and researched and found some packing lists, and we worked it out, and I ended up with about 8.5 kilograms, my daughter with 9 kilograms, and we got ourselves ready. Some of the things that we had to organize, obviously work arrangements, the right shoes. Some people say that you need to have these heavy hiking boots. No, we actually decided on good old tackies that we'd worn in and that were comfortable. We got foot cream so we didn't get blisters, or I didn't get blisters. Clothing, a change of clothing, because you wash your clothes on the way. You can't have more than 1 or 2 changes of clothing, because remember, it's all on your back. What else did we need? Toiletries. If I did this again, I would go with hardly any toiletries. My daughter and her friend have long hair, so there's the shampoo and the conditioner and the creams and the makeup and all this stuff. Eventually, we started turfing out some of these toiletries. If I did it again, I think I'd take one little bottle of something that just cleans everything, because it just ends up, you've just got to make it easy for yourself. Anyway, walking across Spain isn't such a difficult thing when you've got a map book. And we purchased this guidebook here in South Africa, and wherever you go, we started in Leon and ended up in Santiago. So we knew that we were going west across Spain, and we were following the main pilgrim routes. The map books, especially this particular guidebook, it shows you a number of different places on the way where you can stay. You don't book anywhere, you just go, and then you decide. If you're tired, you'll stop sooner and sleep there for the night. If you've got lots of energy, you walk a bit further and sleep in another place. It's actually quite nice. It's quite liberating to have just a few kilograms on your back walking across Spain and knowing that you are going to find somewhere to stay. It was actually brilliant. So that's what the map book looks like. It also shows the elevations, how steep everything is going to be, whether you're going to be walking along a tar road or in forest. And something else that we had to do in Cape Town as well, in fact, most of the big cities have a local, they call it the Confraternity of St. James, where you get your pilgrim's passport, because you get special places where you stay called albergues. It's not any old hostel. It's an albergue especially for pilgrims, and each place you go to, you get a stamp. And you can see all the little stamps there from various coffee shops and places that we stayed. And this was actually really useful for me, because I didn't blog it while I was there, but I'd blogged it a year later. So I had the dates of everywhere that we went, and I took photos with my cell phone, and those photographs I uploaded onto Dropbox when I got into a Wi-Fi area. So you don't have to lug around cameras and laptops and things. So yeah, we had to get all that. So here we go. That shell there, you'll see a lot of shell symbols. That shell is it's the emblem, if you want to call it that, or the logo of the Camino, because in Galicia, which is in northern Spain, these conch shells lie on the beaches, and all roads lead to Santiago. We did the French route. There are about 4 or 5 main routes that you can walk. We did the French route across the top, although we didn't start in France. We started in Leon, Spain. Okay, so we arrive in Leon, beautiful city. We took a bus from Madrid to Leon. Beautiful city, absolutely lovely, but we were totally lost. The guidebook doesn't show detail in towns. Wandered round and round in circles, and already Chelsea got blisters. I want to go home is what we're hearing on day 1. Anyway, somebody eventually showed us the way, and we booked into our hostel for the night. And they said, we booked in other words, you put your rucksacks down on the bed that you're going to sleep that night, you have a shower, then you go out and find something to eat. And they said to us, be back by 9:30. By 10:30, sorry, and they'll leave the place unlocked for us. Anyway, we get back at 9:30, all locked up, so we're standing there in the street wondering what on earth are we going to do. No sound was coming from anywhere. And then we realized that the place that we were staying in was part of a convent, which was next to a church, and the church, something was going on there. There was obviously a service or something happening there. So we actually snuck in the back of the church. There were 4 of us, 2 other girls as well. Snuck through the back of the church and found our way upstairs. Everyone was fast asleep, lights off, bunk beds, 3 to a bunk, so bunk on the floor, then middle, then top, and I was on the top right under the light, so I discovered at 6 o'clock. This was our first night in a true pilgrim hostel, and it was a little bit out of our comfort zone, I must say. Not quite used to that, not used to the snoring, not used to so many people around you sharing showers and trying to find everything in your little rucksack. And the reasons for doing the Camino are as varied as the people that actually walk it. And an Irish pilgrim that we met there, this is what he said to me in an email afterwards: the Camino does not give you what you want, it gives you what you need. That's Chelsea on our second day, and she's got my rucksack on because hers is too heavy. All along the way, there are various statues of pilgrims that did the journey many years ago. We actually only saw very few people that were doing it for religious reasons. Mainly, people are doing it for the sense of adventure, for perhaps spiritual reasons, trying to find themselves. And there are even tour groups that do it in the last week before Santiago. So this town, Hospital de Abijo, is beautiful. We sat there and had lunch, looked at the view, looked at the people walking past, went to our hostel that evening. And even though this looks like such a beautiful town, it's amazing what can put you off. That night, in the middle of the night, sleeping in this room with bunk beds with all sorts of people from everywhere, and hardly anybody spoke English, so we felt a little bit strange. I heard this splashing noise in the middle of the night. I looked up and somebody was vomiting off a top bunk onto the floor, and it was splashing all over the place. Anyway, he quickly cleaned it up, but that little incident actually just gave me the heebie-jeebies and put me off the whole place, which I know is ridiculous, but that's what happened. One thing that you do, though, you meet fantastic people from all over the world, and they're all doing this for different reasons, and that is just so wonderful. These three people, the lady on the right, she's from Belgium. She had terrible shin splints. She was hobbling along with bandages around her legs, and she was happy about that. She said this was telling her to slow down. She led a very, very busy life, and she said, slow down. That's what the Camino is teaching me. The guy in the middle, Venezuelan, he actually had suffered from depression before, and he decided to walk, and the Camino actually really lifted him. I mean, he'd been walking since St. John in France, so he'd already walked about 3 weeks, and look at the big smile on his face. The guy on the left is a Frenchman, or a French-speaking Indian. I'm not sure why he did it, but he seemed to enjoy himself whenever we bumped into him. Chelsea and I walked for the first 3 days on our own, and then we met her best friend from school, Yasmin, in Astorga. And there are Chelsea and Yasmin, and it's raining. So we were well kitted out with our ponchos and our jerseys and our ponchos over the rucksacks as well, and our hiking sticks and everything, and the big smiles on their faces just shows that the weather really didn't count. They were just so happy to see each other again after such a long time. Before Chelsea did this, she'd been in the States for a while, so it was actually nice for her to catch up with us all. And you just walk and walk and walk, and it is just so wonderful to be outdoors and walking in a place that you don't know, but you feel safe. How amazing is that? Fonsibadon, I think this was probably the most interesting night that we had on our Camino. Lovely little hostel in the middle of nowhere. It was snowing and cold outside, so everybody was just in there, very, very festive. They cooked a big meal for us, a big vegetarian paella, and you can see all the smiles on everybody's faces. The two girls in the front were from South Korea. I was quite amazed. There were quite a lot of people from the Far East there that had heard about Camino, and they just wanted to do it. So, as I say, meeting people from all over the world. Wonderful. But what happened there was actually quite a funny story. Because that hostel was quite full, they put us in a heated room upstairs and mattresses on the floor. And you can see Yasmin sitting there in the green jacket with an empty bed next to her. And the person whose bed that was an Italian guy who came along with a reputation of jumping into girls' sleeping bags. So she was a little bit worried, and she sat up for quite a while, as we all did, like what's going to happen when this guy comes along. And he came upstairs. He was a little bit drunk, I think, and he fell into his bed. And the next minute we heard the snoring, and somebody shouts, "Stop the snoring!" And she says, "No, no, no. Let him snore. Then I know he's asleep." So sometimes the snoring is a good thing. And we wake up the next morning and there's snow everywhere, and it's very beautiful. Very cold, but very beautiful. And it just lets us see that you actually have the power to act beyond your thinking and feeling. If you're feeling cold and miserable because it's snowing, so what? You get up and you walk anyway. It's about the context that you set for it, isn't it? Here's my daughter and I standing there. It's snowing outside, and Yasmin took this photo of us. And when I look at that, I think, you know what? It's snowing and it's cold and it's windy, and it's the end of May in the Northern Hemisphere. Why is it snowing? But it was. But you know what? I was with my daughter again, who I hadn't seen for ages, and this was just a most amazing experience. So it's often how you frame things as to how they are. The content is the same. It's still snowing. But the context, what a wonderful time we were having. They even made a little snowman. This is supposed to be the highlight of the whole Camino. This is called Cruz de Ferro, or the Iron Cross, and it's on top of a little hill. And the little hill is made of little pebbles and stones and mementos that people have put there over the years. So from your hometown, you get a little pebble from your garden, put it in your pocket, and when you get to Cruz de Ferro, symbolically, you put the pebble down and you let go of all your baggage. So I had expected to do this and just get this amazing revelation. Well, that didn't quite happen. For the first thing, I realized I had 2 pebbles in my rucksack to this day. Don't know why there were 2. I do know I had a hell of a lot of baggage there that I needed to get sorted out. Anyway, I put the 2 pebbles there. And it just made me think of the question, what can you let go of that's taking up space in your head? How is that baggage serving you? And what opens up for you? What opens up when you've let go of it? If it's taking up all this space and you can't focus and think and dream and enjoy yourself because you're sitting with all this stuff. If you let go of it, it makes sense there's going to be space for new stuff to come in. But as I said, that didn't happen for me on that day. And I was actually quite miserable. But as usual, we just carried on walking. We get to Ponferrada, beautiful town, again, out of our comfort zone in that hostel. We were in a basement, the toilets were miles away. I had some industrial earplugs with me, and that's the night that I hauled them out, because the snoring was unbelievably loud. But anyway, you sort of get used to it. But yeah, the hostel wasn't great. But the reason we stayed at that hostel, it was free. And we were there on a tight budget. I mean, the girls had only just left school 2 years before. And I'd had to scrimp and save to pay for my air ticket and for our expenses there. So we were staying in the cheaper hostels. So sometimes you expect them to be a little bit overcrowded. You can stay in hotels and B&Bs if you want to. Some of my friends have done this walk and they have done that. And next time, I think I would probably alternate. Yeah. What I would like to talk about a little bit is this comfort zone that I keep referring to. Comfort zone is when you're sitting in your life and you're comfortable and everything's fine. You're not really moving anywhere. But if you look at it ecologically, you have to. You have to be pulled in one direction or another. You're either going to develop or get extinct. You can't stay still. It's impossible. So what I believe if you take a healthy challenge out of your comfort zone, something that's going to serve you and inspire you, and not too much out of it, 20% out of it works. If you take 80% out of comfort zone into something really awful, you're going to be 80% challenged, and either you're going to just give up, or if you take something that's only a little bit out of comfort zone, 5%, 10%, you're not really going to grow, are you? So I recommend a 20% growth, 20% out of comfort zone is what works to develop and grow and move forwards. And if you don't ever do this, your comfort zone eventually becomes your discomfort zone, because things start popping up to challenge you that you don't want. So isn't it better to choose to move forwards with things that you do want? Anyway, many arrows along the way. Quite difficult to get lost, really. Arrows are painted along on trees and on rocks in more than on Table Mountain, where I've been lost a number of times. This is much better marked. And I'm just going to flick through a few beautiful slides just to show you where we walked. Beautiful area in northern Spain. These girls are a little bit out of their comfort zone, because that's Chelsea and Yasmin with a British guy that they met, Jordan, and he's in his mid-30s, and they're only 20. So they were a little bit wary of him, especially because in his rucksack, instead of water in his water bottles, he's got red wine. So by lunchtime, he's a little bit wobbly. But anyway, we're still friends on Facebook, and he's a nice guy. So you meet very interesting people along the way. Also something, because I don't know if you noticed on the rucksack, I had a shell on the back. If you've got a shell on your rucksack, then you're sort of recognizable as a pilgrim that's doing the walk. And people open their arms to you to offer you things, people in the area. They like the tourism in the area, and they respect what you're doing. And here in the middle of the woods, there's a little table being set up by some locals, and they've got nuts and sweets and chocolates and cold drink, and you can just help yourself. Or you can give a little donation. And they're just there because they like seeing the people come past. It's wonderful. Oh, there's yours truly. And here we are in Galicia. Galicia is that part of northern Spain that is cold and wet, and it's towards the end of the Camino. Well, for us, it was about halfway through. And Galicia is where all the old legends originate from. And the beaches there is where they have all those conch shells that I told you about. You see there on the left side in the middle, you'll see that's also a shell symbol of the Camino. And here are the girls. There was quite a stiff climb that day. And they are contemplating life at the top of the hill. And how often do you do that? How often do you check in with yourself? And we walk through beautiful scenery. We get to the top of the hill at O Cabrero, and I didn't like this little town. It was too neat. The other little villages were a little bit tumbled down, dogs running around, little old shops and little old ladies, and just real. O Cabrero, I felt, was very touristy. The buildings were still beautiful, but they were almost too clean and neat. You can't see in this photograph, but what is nice about this church is that the wisteria, I think it's wisteria, some purple plant grows out of the bricks, so the whole building looks purple. It was lovely. And the views from up there are magnificent, actually. And things are not what they seem. That's something that we always think about as well. Expectations lead to disappointment. Assumptions. If we assume here, if we look at that photo, first glance, you think Chelsea's met someone on the walk, and they're sitting having a nice chat, and Yasmin's feeling all left out as a third wheel. In actual fact, it's nothing like that at all. The girls just sat down under a tree, and this guy just comes and parks himself down next to Chelsea and says, "I'll smile for your photo." And that was it. So simple as that. It's not what it seems at all. We decided to take a detour to Samos. Samos is one of the largest monasteries or convents in the Western Hemisphere. It is huge, and it's off the main route. It was in the guidebook, but there were no arrows or anything. But we found our way to Samos, and I wanted to experience it to see why and what. And I wanted to get a feel of this monastery. And I must say, I didn't find it very uplifting. I found it quite dark, not only dark because it wasn't light, but dark as in a little bit, I just found it a little bit morbid. A lot of beautiful, beautiful artwork there. And obviously the architecture of the building itself was absolutely exquisite. But the artwork, I personally found it a little bit macabre, Middle Ages. That as well, that's in the chapel, and you can't really see from there, but if you see all those little round things around the statue, they are heads and skulls, if you look closely. I think that's, I don't know, yeah, a little bit scary, a little bit, Anyway, if a Dutch girl and I decided that we'd go to the monastery that night. For the first time in my life, I went to a mass because we wanted to hear the monks chant. They do this Gregorian chant, and it's absolutely beautiful. So it was very interesting. She and I didn't know what was going on. We just stood up when everyone else stood up and sat down when everyone else sat down. But it was a wonderful experience. And that's why we went to Samos. And then when we left Samos the next day, of course, now we're trying to find the route again. And we walked, and the girls were, they must have been about 1.5 km behind me. They said they were going to go slow, so I said, well, I'll go further on and see if I can find the path. Because, of course, we're off the beaten track now. We've taken this detour. We've got to find our way back to the track, back to the road, okay? And we walked for a very, very long time. And I actually realized that we were lost. And I was on my own at this stage. It was very beautiful. It was very misty and green, and I felt like I was in a womb of green. It was actually quite amazing. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm not lost. I'm on my planet. How can I be lost? I'm in one of the safest places in the world. And in that moment, I almost took a deep breath, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to stop gripping and controlling and resisting, and I'm going to let go a little bit. I'm going to surrender a little bit and see what happens. Something very, very interesting that happened, and I only knew this afterwards, and I knew this because of the stamps in my little book, okay? All the way during the Camino, when I'd been walking on my own and the girls were behind me or in front of me, I'd been quite aware of my dad. Now, my dad died in 2005, and I'd thought, if there was anyone in my family who would love to do this with me, who would it be? And it would be my dad. He loved climbing and hiking. So he was on my mind pretty often. I don't want to say that he was walking with me, but it almost felt like that sometimes. Anyway, on that day, which was actually the 29th of May, as I looked in my book and I saw we left Samos that day and arrived in Saria, 29th of May, that was the anniversary of his death. Now, how weird is that? I didn't know that at the time at all. A year later, I did a blog of this whole thing and I connected the dates. And I thought that was so strange. Because I also, every night, I wrote a little journal, just a little notebook like this, just where we were and what the thoughts were going through my head at that particular time. And when I connected the dots, much, much later, I realized it was the same date. So it was almost, you can interpret it any way that you like. But I like to think that my dad, I needed to have my dad with me. I was in a rotten place emotionally before I did the Camino, with my home and my work and everything. I was in a really rotten emotional space. And my dad needed to be with me, or I needed him to be with me. But after getting lost, and I was able to trust in something else, maybe trust in myself, trust in something bigger than me, I wasn't aware of his presence anymore. I just knew that everything was going to be all right. And after that, the second part of my Camino was actually a lot better. I could feel it in my body. I was more relaxed. I knew that there were things I had to do. My goals of walking this Camino were to sort out my head, really, to sort out my home life that was a mess, to sort out my work that I was very bored with. And I knew there were things I had to do, but I knew I'd be okay. Anyway, if you can see there, right at the back, there's a little yellow arrow. We eventually found an arrow again at the end of the day and ended up in Saria, which is where we wanted to be. So we probably lost for about 4 or 5 hours. So it wasn't a train smash, but it was quite a big thing for me. And there's Yasmin just celebrating. Yo, we're here, we're in Saria, and we're in a lovely hostel. And we all felt a hell of a lot better. Completion tools that we use, if you're stuck with something. I look back and I'd been very, very, very stuck. Just to acknowledge, what am I stuck about? What is it? And sometimes that can be 1 or 2 or even 3 coaching sessions if I look back now. What is it that I'm stuck with? Okay, need to make a decision. Make a decision about whatever it is I'm stuck with. I made decisions then. I was going to do something about my home life, and I was going to do something about my work. And in actual fact, I was going to take up life coaching, because that's what I'd wanted to do for years. And I made the decision on the Camino that that's what I was going to do. And then I let it go. It wasn't bothering me anymore, and the rest of my walk was great. And I became more authentic, because I realized the last few years I hadn't been authentic at all. I was always covering up and pretending to be someone else just to try and cope with my life that was so miserable. It was my own fault because I just wasn't dealing with anything. But yeah, to be authentic, and looking at that photo, lots of beautiful green fields, and all I wanted to do was lie in a field. So we did that one day. And you can see there, it wasn't all a bed of roses or fields of grass. I had got a bit of an ankle injury, which I strapped up. And to this day, if I go for a long walk, I have to strap up my ankle. But it's fine. I'm authentic. I'm not Mrs. Superwoman or Mrs. Perfect. I also have aches and pains and emotional ups and downs, just like everybody else. We've made it to the 100K mark, 100 Ks to go to Santiago. And that's a celebration in itself. But what actually happens, that's just past Sarria. The last 100 Ks before Santiago is when the Camino gets really, really busy, because there's a lot of tour groups that go through then, and it's only a week's walking. So it's very doable. So it was still absolutely beautiful, and we walked at our own pace anyway. Something I want to quickly tell you as well, talking about comfort zone, everyone has different levels of comfort zone, and it's different things for everybody. For me, the hike wasn't out of comfort zone. I was quite prepared for that. The snoring wasn't out of comfort zone. But for me, what was out of my comfort zone was FOMO, fear of missing out. You know, you meet these wonderful pilgrims, these wonderful people from all around the world, and then they're gone. It's like, oh, where are they now? I mean, we'd taken this detour, so we missed a whole lot of people. Like, where are they now? What's happening? It was terrible. I felt like a teenager again when everyone else is out on a Saturday night and you're sitting at home with your mother. It was terrible. I just had severe FOMO at the beginning of the Camino. Towards the end, it didn't bother me so much because I was starting to center and starting to be okay with myself again. Anyway, that's just... There was a South African hostel there. People from Claremont had set up a hostel. In fact, we didn't see any other South Africans on the whole trip until right near the end in Santiago. So that was quite interesting. So we became a little bit of a celebrity. We didn't stay at that hostel, though, because they were cooking spaghetti bolognese that night, and 2 out of the 3 of us vegetarians, so it didn't work. The reason I put that photo in is look at that rucksack. It was huge, and she didn't complain too much. But the reason I put it in, it was just to remind me about compassion. Compassion for me is getting what the other person is going through, really getting it, giving them a nice big hug. But also requesting the best of them for that day. If someone you know is going through a really awful time, really horrible time, nice big hug, cup of tea. Okay, what can you do for yourself today that's going to make you feel better? To me, that's compassion, because it's also empowering them a little bit, that they know that you're feeling what's going on, but still requesting that they do something small about it. Here's Porto Marine, beautiful place. Sat on those steps until 10:30 at night in the sun. But the hostel, another big hostel that we went in, it was a municipal hostel. Everybody's boots and shoes and tackies all stink, actually, so they all have to be parked outside the room where you sleep. And there's everybody's hiking sticks as well, and the bunk beds. This was quite interesting because the bunk beds was like sets of 2s, like this, and then above. And the other part of my 2, there was some French guy there that I'd never met before in my life, and he was very rude. He didn't say goodnight or anything. And in the middle of the night, I turned over, and he got such a fright, he nearly jumped out of the bed. I don't know what he thought, but that was actually, for me, that was quite funny. And we saw this along the way as well. Somebody had made hearts. People put little mementos all along the way. We actually saw a lot of, if they're pilgrims and if they're there for religious reasons, you see quite a lot of crosses and photographs of people that have died. I live near Somerset West, and I know there's a road that goes round Gordons Bay to Claremont, and if someone has died in a car crash on that road, there's a little cross, a little photograph, and some flowers. I saw quite a few of those along the Camino, and I don't think it's for people that died on the Camino. It might be people remembering relatives. So there's a lot of heart space stuff going on here. This hostel was actually quite funny. It was full, so they put me in the room downstairs for disabled people, which was lovely, a nice big room and 2 beds in it. And then at about 8 o'clock, some old American guy arrived, and I just made a joke. I said, "Oh, I hope you don't snore." And he looked at me, so he says, "If I snore, you have to wake me up." I have sleep apnea and I have a mask. And if my mask is falling off, it makes me snore. And you've got to wake me or I could die. So, and that actually happened. He had this thing over his face. He was actually a very sweet guy. But of course, his wife was very worried about him going across Spain on his own when he gets sleep apnea. He'd been in sleep clinics and everything in the States, and they couldn't cure it. But he had to wear this mask, which keeps his nostrils open. And if the mask is slipping, he starts snoring. So I jumped up and woke him a few times, and he thanked me. Yeah, getting closer to Santiago now. These girls, these are the Italians that we met right in the beginning. And remember I said the Camino gives you what you need, not necessarily what you want, but it gives you what you need. The girl on the right, she got pregnant. Just before the Camino, she'd been in Madrid and she met a guy and they had a fun time. And at the end of the Camino in Santiago, she announced that she was pregnant. And I was like, oh, poor girl. And she actually said, no, this is such a blessing. She says, you don't know, but I'm actually in my 30s. And she said, why do I have to have a husband to have a child? I'm actually so happy about this. And she phoned her mother, and her mother's happy, and I'm friends with her on Facebook, and she's got this 2.5-year-old toddler running around as they're as happy as anything. So the Camino gave her what she needed. Wouldn't have been everybody's choice. Yeah, need I say more? The power of presence with walking. What I find when I walk, and I walk and coach as well, because what I find when I walk, looking up and being in my senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, and walking, makes me very, very, very present. It gives my brain a good old break. If I'm walking and looking down, it's churning, and I'm thinking and thinking and thinking, and sometimes that's good, but sometimes it's a bit much. So walking brings a huge power of presence, and that's what I needed. And it took me 2 weeks to get there, but yeah, that's what it does. And we made it to Santiago. Now, Santiago was possibly the goal for this journey, but you know what? The goal was the journey itself. If we hadn't made it, if we got some awful injury or someone had got sick, then it would have been very disappointing. But for me, the goal was the journey and the process, not really to get to Santiago. And I can say that because it's still continuing. Stuff that happened to me on the Camino still goes on. I still look back. I'm still discovering things. I'm still checking myself. Am I out of comfort zone? I need to be out of comfort zone for any magic to happen. Santiago is the most beautiful little city. We stayed there for a few days. These are girls from Australia that we'd met right in the beginning, and they wanted to greet us. Someone ran through and said to them, the South Africans are coming, the South Africans are coming. And they didn't have a flag, so she hung up her sarong, and they started cheering as we came in. So it was quite a nice welcome, actually. And the girls were just exuberant. I mean, look at that. They're so happy that we made it to Santiago. We'd walked 3 weeks for 328 Ks, so it wasn't particularly long. One day was 10 Ks, some days were 26, just what we felt like. There was a British Navy guy who walked this, and he did it because he wanted to prove to everyone how fit he was. And he started at the other side of the Pyrenees, and he was doing like 45, 50 Ks a day. On day 3, he got so badly injured, he ended up in the hospital, and he couldn't walk for another week. And we met up with him in Surrey, and he still had a huge ego. So I don't know how long it would take him to get rid of that ego, but really that's what the Camino was doing for him. You have a big ego, I'll show you. That's the Compostela. This is what you get when you arrive in Santiago, and it's basically just to say that you've made it, that I started in Leon, ended in Santiago with the date on. And I said in the beginning that I liken this to a coaching cycle where you have your goals and your commitments and you keep your integrity. That happened to me all along the Camino. My goals and my commitments, I look back now, because I wasn't coached before the Camino. When I got back, I found a phenomenal life coach, and I went to her for 12 sessions, and then I became a coach myself. And then I made the discoveries that I know about now. In other words, now I have a sense of purpose. I didn't then, now I do. I want to empower other people to also find their vision and their goals and how to do that and how to make those commitments that are IMTing and 20% out of comfort zone. And are those goals aligned with your values? I'm going back. If we look at categories of human experience, I'm just going to mention this really, really quickly. At the beginning of the Camino, I was sitting in category 4, miserable, didn't feel good, nothing I did was good for me, I was enabling, I was not serving any higher purpose. I walk the Camino, it doesn't always feel good, out of comfort zone. It's good for me, good for others. I can see now it served a higher purpose. I ended that Camino actually in category 1, feeling fantastic, totally in flow, knowing I had work to do, but I was able to do it. And I needed help. I went to a life coach, but I look back at the whole Camino as a coaching cycle from being sitting in category 4 and moving to peak. So the lessons really, and we are about to end, so the timing, got 3 minutes left. The lessons, be open to opportunity. There's a world of opportunities out there. Keep your promises to yourself and to other people. Set your goals in line with your values. If it's something you don't really want, why are you doing it? Make sure that your commitments are inspiring, moving, and touching. And even if they aren't, like doing your tax, you know you've got to do it. It's not inspiring, moving, or touching. It's awful. But you know what? The feeling afterwards is. So that, anyway, that's what I tell myself, because I know I have to do it. And integrity. Keep your integrity levels up. Really, if you're promising to yourself that you're going to do all these things and then you don't do them, what's the point, really? And getting out of that comfort zone. Because getting out of that comfort zone, allowing yourself to be a little bit vulnerable. Brene Brown has got a fantastic video online called The Power of Vulnerability. If you Google that, you'll see that when you're vulnerable, you become more open to more interesting, new, exciting, and passionate stuff coming in to your life. And be unattached to the how and surrender to that. I didn't know how I was going to get through all my stuff. I had thought it was going to be when I arrived at Cruz de Ferro and I dropped my pebbles, then wow, everything was just going to happen. And it wasn't that at all. It was actually getting lost and stopping trying to just control absolutely everything in my life and letting go and surrendering. That's when it all happened. That's when it all started. And Robin Sharma says that luck is no more than the marriage of preparation with opportunity. Thank you. If anyone's got any questions to ask, I'm happy to answer them about coaching or about the Camino. And a good walk moves you out of the questions and into the answers. Julia Cameron's the author of The Artist's Way. And, yeah. Anybody? So I wish you all a world of opportunity.